back in 2016, you could just grab a box, send some really cool things in it, and you would have a great business. Well, it's changed. Now you can't just send a box of stuff and expect people to keep coming back. You really have to create an experience.
All right, everybody, welcome to another case study episode with Launch Your Private Podcast. Today we have Julie Ball. I'm super excited to chat with her. She had a private podcast feed for a very popular subscription box in our space. She also has sold her company since she was using that, which I'm also excited to chat about because I think that's awesome. That's like next level unlocking business owner, right? Like new levels achieved there. So we'll dive in with how you can actually think about private podcasts with physical products, right? Maybe you're listening and you don't have a physical product, but I do think about reimagining kind of that relationship between in real life, quote, I'm throwing air quotes, and like private podcasting, which feels very digital. And so I think this is kind of will be a cool dive into that. So Julie, thanks for coming. Why don't you give just a quick intro about yourself?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love to talk shop, and I think this is going to be a unique episode because we are talking about physical products. So, a little bit about me. I am a wife, a homeschooling mom of a 12-year-old. Oh my gosh, she's almost a teenager. Okay, take a deep breath. Okay, and a subscription box expert. So, long story short, did about 10 years in corporate. I say it like throwing my air quotes to it, like I did time. 10 years in corporate.
Nora relates to that, I
I
think.
totally do. Yes, I do.
And then in 2011, I left corporate America. It was a leap of faith. It was to become a stay-at-home mom, very big identity change, and I was really missing using certain parts of my brain, that creative and, like, analytical side, and so I started my first side hustle using naps, nights, and weekends, kind of like the time that I had in the margins. So fast forward from 2011 to 2016. 2016 is when I started my subscription box business. Self-taught, it was an emerging trend, but there were no coaches in the niche in that industry yet. And so I started Sparkle Hustle Grow in 2016. It is a monthly subscription box for female entrepreneurs. Long story short, we sent a box of goodies that you could use in your business, like office supplies, tech gadgets, stationery, always a book, which was super fun. And then we had a community as well. And so after sending 65,000 boxes and $2.5 million in revenue, I sold the box business in summer of 2022. And the new owner is still running the box, has a very similar vision. She's doing an amazing job. Never thought that selling my business was part of my script and my story, but here we are, and it is. So since then, I've been focusing more on the coaching side of things. After having run a subscription box business, a lot of people ask me, "Can I pick your brain?" And so that's when I launched my first course, and that's when I started following you guys. And Lindsay, you shared a lot about your journey. And from a marketing perspective, that just drew me in so much. So I was an early adopter of your software, and here we are.
Here we are. That's so
One of the
fun.
OGs. Love it.
Yeah. Yes. Talking with an OG. Gosh, I remember those days of just being like people that I looked up to in the space, signing up and like being into it and getting what we were doing with our product was really cool. And so you're definitely one of those people because I had been watching you for a long time and I was like, that is such first of all, I could never run a subscription box company. That's like next level organization, but that's like a side thing. So I'm always like how you like are inspired by people that do things that you're like, dude, I don't think I could ever. And so just like watching you build that community and then trusting us in an early version of our product, like that means a lot to us for
Thank you.
sure. So I'm curious, like when you were like, okay, Lindsay's sharing about this cool thing and it's like innovative. You clearly like to do innovative things and you're kind of like ahead of trends and stuff like that. Why were you like, okay, private podcasting makes sense, even though you have all these like physical things? Like, what about it made you say, like, oh, yeah, I think adding this would be of value?
Okay, so the story with how I started working with Hello Audio was I actually used it for my course first. And
Ah,
so I have a course called Subscription Box Bootcamp, and it teaches people how to start a profitable subscription box business. So that was like the easy thing. That was a no-brainer. Let's just put a private podcast so people can listen to this on the go. And so that's where the love story begins. And as I got tons of really great feedback on that, it just got me to thinking, okay, I already pay for this awesome software. Like, how else can I use it? Can I use it for my subscription box business? And I'll tell you that some trends in the subscription box industry is back in 2016, you could just grab a box, send some really cool things in it, and you would have a great business. Well, it's changed. Now you can't just send a box of stuff and expect people to keep coming back. You really have to create an experience. And so I thought to myself, how can I improve the experience with Sparkle Hustle Grow? So, one of the big components of the Sparkle Hustle Grow subscription box was that we brought guest experts in every single month. And those guest experts were there to teach us something about business. So, maybe an accountant or someone who works with legal for small business, social media marketing, all different types of things that we needed to learn as small business owners. And so, oftentimes, they would provide us with a video or they would do a presentation via Facebook Live. But the challenge was that we couldn't get everyone in the room at the same time. People were working full-time jobs. Maybe this was a side hustle. And so we tried to solve the problem of where can we meet them where they're at? How can they consume this information, which is really helpful information? And one of the reasons why they join, how can they consume it maybe on the go or easier? Insert hello audio. This is where we decided to take all of those videos even if it was a Facebook Live in our private group, we could still download that video, or we could use the video that the guest expert shared with us, and we would just extract the audio and use it into a private and turn it into a private podcast. And I think one of the things that I have to say here is if you're listening and you're like, I'm not a podcaster. Well, the entire private podcast feed was other people. It was guest experts coming in. I think I recorded a 60-second intro as episode one, explaining what this is in case someone was new to this. And I said, this is a great way to take action and listen on the go. You're going to learn and buckle up. So it was really easy to do and it was really well received. And it just gave us kind of another thing to promote as well in that value stack as a membership
Mhm.
perk. You know, you got a private podcast. We created this really cute podcast art that we could use in social media and talk about it. So it was such a win because it was repurposing content we already had, but giving it to our members in a way that they could listen on the go.
My goodness. So you really did create that experience for folks, in addition to giving them all the physical goods that they
Right.
get and the excitement of being able to open something, right? And enjoying that part of it. But now you're also being able to reach them in a different way.
Yep.
I'm curious when you did that. I just want to know what the audience thought of it, I guess, first and foremost. And then were you looking at consumption rates and the data on the back end to see who's listening and how much people were listening compared to maybe the views or how people were showing up maybe during a live video?
Yeah, definitely. I was looking at that. I wasn't looking specifically at who was listening, but I was just trying to get a feel for like, is this worth my time to do this? And the numbers absolutely showed that it was worth my time, that people were listening and they were binging, which is super cool because what we gave them access to as well, when they became a member, they got access to the entire feed. So we ended up having probably 2 years of content before I
Wow.
sold the business. And so they could go back and listen to past guest experts, which was like a bonus for them. And so anything that you can do to create that experience to make sure that they're actually using the things that are part of the membership, part of the subscription is definitely a win. This gave us so much to talk about too from a marketing perspective because
Mhm.
private podcasts were very new to my audience. And they're like, "Ooh, what's this cool thing Julie's doing?" And so it allowed them to experience new tech.
Yeah. I like this, like that decision, because that's a decision a lot of membership owners make is do I give them the back catalog, like they didn't pay me or whatever. But what's interesting about a physical, like you can't go back and give them the same product 2 years ago, but you're giving them content that you know that that ideal person who's buying that box can get value from. And so I think that was a really smart move on your part to like keep that all there because that's also a really cool way to get someone really engaged right at the beginning. They buy their first box and then it's like, not only are they maybe waiting for their box to come or like waiting for the next box, but there's this connection that is still happening that is not tied to that physical delivery, which I think is like, that's pretty smart. That's genius, actually. That's really cool.
So, if you are in the subscription space or even have a membership, one of the terms that you are probably really familiar with is retention. Retention is the percent of people that come back month after month or sales cycle after sales cycle. So, giving our subscribers that back catalog was an attempt at improving retention. So, it was just an easy way to do it. It didn't cost us any more money and people liked it.
Yeah, I think that's huge because like I could see that too carrying over. Like maybe they didn't get through all the episodes or something like that. And so I think based on this conversation that I think is really applicable, whether or not you have a physical product or a subscription business, is this idea of creating an experience where someone wants to stick around for a length of time. And even if it is a course that they're not paying you monthly, them sticking around and still getting value from you is it always plays into testimonials, case studies, shouting you out, referrals, right? Like referrals behind the scenes of things we don't even know, people that send you, your way. And I think like really actually focusing when you know the offer's good, it's selling, people are sticking around, thinking about how you can up level your experience and add something like a private podcast or a community element or something like that is definitely taking things to the next level. And so you were in business a while and added this cool value that we always like to say that we think that podcasts like audio recordings are such an easy like for the least amount of work for you as the creator, and you brought that up, right? You're like, I don't know how to podcast, I've never podcasted before, or like I'm not what I would call myself a podcaster, and I didn't even have to record any of these. Like they were already being done. So I just had to put them into Hello Audio and send a feed and set
Yep.
that up. And once you get that going, I mean, it's a pretty simple process. That value add that became a bonus, that became something in a value stack, that became a retention thing with as little work as possible. I mean, that's like the holy grail of entrepreneurship, right?
Yes, and you don't even have to be a subscription or a membership. If you just sell any sort of physical product, make a podcast feed that's 10 ways to use your product. Get them
Mm,
using the product and teaching them new ways to use it, or especially if it's a replenishable product, you want them to use it so they run out and they buy more.
and then don't go and try to find something else or something like that. Yeah, that's a
Exactly.
really good point. We've talked about these ideas with ecom folks, but we don't have a ton of examples. We have like one other one. That's really cool that you're even making that connection. I think it's true. I think it's like creating that relationship is something that I think a private podcast does really well.
Now, I know you may not be able to share specific numbers, but do you remember like if it did help retention? As I know you're probably using it as an experiment, and obviously you're adding value to the audience and to your customers. Did it have an impact on retention when you added the private podcast?
I'm sure it did, but I don't have those stats anymore since I don't own the business. And we had rolled it out at the same time as we rolled out a price increase. And
Mm,
when we rolled out that price increase to kind of soften the blow, we said we're also adding these things, these elements, these
Smart.
membership perks. And the private podcast was one of them. Now, I have to think that it impacted it in some way because our retention and the opposite of retention is churn. And our churn definitely went down after we raised the price and added on these membership perks. So we were attracting
Wow.
more of the right person, but we were giving them more membership perks too. And I will tell you, when we raised that price, we did not add any more physical products. We only
mm,
added experiential factors.
Wow, that's huge to have a
mhm.
price increase and then to not have churn increase at all.
Mhm.
And the really from I'm assuming it helped with profit margin and operate all
Lifetime
the
Oh,
value.
things,
for
right?
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, operational
Yeah.
complexity was you don't want to add more things you have to source or more things.
Yeah.
That's fascinating that you were that the combination of that didn't result in additional churn. So that means to me that means there was an impact,
Yeah.
especially if you're getting positive feedback on the content, which it sounds like the
Mhm.
content was also pretty amazing.
Well, and some people we were a learning platform in a way, and some people learn visually, some love a video, and some people just wanna listen. And so
Mm.
I felt like we were being more accessible. We were helping people consume the content in whatever learning style best suits them.
Yeah, so you were a subscription box that also leaned into the education space, the
Mhm.
community space. Again, just providing more value and giving people, from a teaching perspective, other
Right.
options. So, yeah, I love that. And I think about too what you said at the beginning, like I put it in a course first. Like, so you already had that mindset about accessibility and like
Mhm.
people are more likely to watch it or listen and get the content and move through that content. That makes sense of that like jump or whatever. But
Right.
maybe courses are the gateway drug to other private podcasts. I don't know if we've said that before, but that may or may not be true.
Love it.
I'm curious to hear if like you have any like stories of your folks talking about the private podcast feed or anything you can remember of like an email or a DM or something like that, feedback from your folks. And I know we're asking you to think back a little bit, but
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a specific groundbreaking story other than the fact that people say that they appreciated it because they
mm,
were on the go. A lot of them would listen to it on their commute. And I think that is
Mm.
super cool because when you are doing a side hustle, which the majority of our subscribers identified as side hustlers, that they had a full time job, they envisioned growing their side hustle into a larger business. They want to exit their 9 to 5. And we gathered that information not only in our Facebook community that was private just for subscribers, we had those types of conversations, but we also surveyed our customers. And so it was definitely what would I call it? Like a string that you could see kind of woven throughout feedback that people just appreciated it.
That's awesome. Now, I know you do coach and help other folks that are interested in launching subscription boxes. And I know you probably have a lot of folks that want to pick your brain after the success of yours. Do you, when you're coaching folks, is a private podcast, that strategy something you recommend to other folks that are in this space? Is that something that you look at as a viable strategy for other folks that have subscription boxes?
I think it is definitely a great add on. It's not going to be the core component because let's face it, people are buying subscription boxes for the stuff, but
Yeah.
they're gonna stick around for the experience, and some things that you can do for experience is having a community, is giving them things like playlists, giving them things like private podcasts, other ways to experience the transformation that your subscription box promises. And so it is definitely one of those things that the core of a subscription box is always gonna be the physical product, but layering those membership perks and those add-ons can really make an impact on not only just retention, but also acquiring new customers. We absolutely put it on our website as a membership perk, and I think that's important. It was just the easiest thing for me too, because a VA would just grab the video and drop it in. And I do you still have that feature where you can just drop in a video and it extracts the
yeah.
audio? Oh,
It's
yeah.
It's one of our
it's kind of
favorites.
the main thing. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
the
that's
definitely the
beautiful.
wow factor when you first sign up for
Yes.
Hello Audio.
Mhm.
For sure. I thinking about what you said too with the physical product and something that's a private podcast. I think to me as a consumer, right? We're wowed. There's lots of things you can do with a subscription. Like you're the coach, not me, but I'm a consumer, right? And I'm a consumer of
Mhm.
lots of different products. I don't think I'm in a subscription box anymore, but I have been. And like a lot of it is like what it looks like, what's in
Mhm.
it, right? Like that presentation factor. And I could see something like QR code, that has I would be like, "Wow, that's really interesting." So from like an
Mhm.
innovative perspective, I think that also is I've never seen this before because my guess is there's probably not a lot of, subscription boxes that have it. And yeah, maybe I'm listening to stories how other people are using the product or where the stuff was sourced from, or like it's interviewing the owners, like the women, like maybe you're a
Love that.
box that like has only female founded products. Like that's, like, pretty cool. I think that wow piece on the, like, the experience side is also tied to the fact that it's pretty unique, and so it's easy for you as the subscription box owner to create, and then it's, like, really unique. It's not I don't know. I'm trying to think I'm sure you probably have a bunch of ideas of what people can include. Yeah, maybe a membership,
Yeah.
something I have to log into, but this idea that a podcast is, "Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know what it was." Maybe they didn't even buy because of that, but then
Right.
they got it and experienced it and was like, "Cool. I actually got to hear, like, the stories behind each of the products in my box. That's really cool." So, I feel like
Yeah,
there's a
and
lot of wow factor with the uniqueness of it.
you wouldn't even have to be in the education space like I was. I
Right?
was, working with female entrepreneurs. Say you have a dog box, maybe you invite your customers to tell stories about their dogs. Or
To
maybe you do have a box that features small businesses. And so do a quick interview with each business owner, like, why did you start your business? How did you come up with this idea? There's just so many content topics
Mhm.
that could be applicable to any type of box, whether you are a baking box or you're a dog box or a self-care box. There's self-care
Ooh,
boxes
like
could have
meditations
meditation.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yep. I think I love that kind of stuff where we get to play with all the different ideas of the ways you could use a private podcast. But yeah, I definitely think it's a unique value add that tends not to be a heavy lift.
Mhm.
And what's cool too is if someone stays for a long time, that feed just continues to grow. They don't have to resubscribe. It's just right there. Their income's their
Love
box,
it.
income's the episode, right? Like if you feature a customer or you feature, yeah, depending obviously on the angle of your business. Ooh, this is fun. I feel like we're giving I hopefully this will be like a bunch of people wanna start a subscription box and they, like, look for Julie.
Yeah, and actually, I love to talk shop like that too. So, if you are a subscription box or a membership owner and you're like, "What could I talk about?" Just DM me. My Instagram is subscription box basics. And so I would be happy to just talk shop with you too and listen and say, "Okay, well, if you're a box that does this or you're a membership that does this, have you thought about doing a private podcast for this?" I would love to do that type of talking shop in the DM.
I'm curious. I know a lot of our users, especially folks that have been around for a while, there's a lot of ideas on how to use private podcasts. So are you sitting on an idea or do you have one kind of in your back pocket that you've maybe been thinking about? You're like, oh, maybe one day I'll get there. Or maybe listened to some other episode. You thought maybe I should try that. Do you have one idea that you've been kind of thinking about?
Well, I do have a public podcast. And so that is a huge lead generation. But I've always toyed around with the idea of doing so I hate doing live video. I'll just be honest with that. Like I hate doing Facebook lives. You won't catch me doing that type of lead generation or pre-launch runway to the next subscription box bootcamp launch. But I would absolutely do a private podcast where you had to sign up to get in to listen, where I'm maybe dishing all my secret shipping hacks or, my favorite vendors or whatever. I think that could be really impactful as far as getting people into like giving them some good content that I don't want just floating out there, but using it as lead generation. And so that's me speaking as a digital course provider, not a subscription box owner. But I'll have to think on that one as far as a subscription box business because I can't see why it wouldn't work as a lead gen option for that too.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that, but I do love the idea of a pop-up podcast
Mhm.
for selling your
Mhm,
programs or like your
mhm.
courses that I think could work really well too. Pretty
Andrea
juicy
Jones'
tidbits.
episode just dropped today, and I think,
Oh,
she
yeah.
has some good I really like super niche, like, offers because I think of, like, Jordan Gill and her reel that she did. She did one reel and had, like, 200 people sign up in a couple days, like, it wasn't just, like, selling anything. It was just like, "Hey, you're an operations manager. You should sign up for this podcast," right? So, like, "Hey, you're a subscription box owner." That's something that's super shareable. People are following you specifically because of that, and then you can make the content, like, really tailored to that specific thing. It's marketing 101, right? But, like,
Ooh,
the idea that it's,
yeah,
like,
I love
very
it.
specific is
Yeah.
cool, and I know Andrea talked about, like, her magic sauce was, like, it just opened up conversations in the DM, and she put it in every episode. "Send me a DM, like, what you got out of this episode," and that's where she was closing her sales for I think it was, like, an agency, like, she was teaching people agency stuff. So a lot of people are doing really cool stuff with, yeah, private podcast as like a lead magnet, but as
Yeah.
a launch event, basically. And so if you have something super juicy on the front end of, yeah, vendors or something that like every subscription box owner is looking for, and that content is, they have to give their email for it and they can listen. And then you drop in, hey, send me a DM if you, or I think it was for her, it wasn't just questions. It was send me a DM if you want access to this checklist.
So just sitting here chatting with you guys about it, it makes me think about a presentation that I did at Sub Summit 2 years ago. And it
That's
was
so
the
funny.
top 10 retention tips. And I sort of had
Mm.
it themed to music. So like you're simply the best.
Oh
And
my
was
goodness,
one
I
of
love
our,
this.
our retention tips is you have to put out a great product. So think that could be a pop-up podcast where I did 10 episodes where I'm talking about my top 10 retention tips. There we go.
I
Just
love that.
brainstorming that just came to me, and that would be a fantastic lead gen for me.
Yes. Oh my god, I would opt into that. That sounds fantastic. It's super creative and it's super valuable because, I mean, I don't have to tell you, right? Retention is key. It's just as important, if not more important, than your client acquisition, right? I love this. And you could probably sit
Right.
here and brainstorm a bazillion more because you've got so much existing content and things
Right.
that, for those of you that are listening, if you get asked questions, the top 10 questions that you're typically asked, the top 10 questions that people don't ask, but probably should ask you, like that could be all of that content
Brilliant.
could turn into a private podcast as a lead magnet as well. That's
I
awesome.
love that. And again, that was a presentation I already did. So I already have that content compiled. Now I just get to sit down and talk about it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Existing content just to be able to repurpose makes those are the private podcasts that make me really happy. Really, really happy because they're super easy to create. I love
Mhm.
that. Oh my goodness. So I'm curious if you're obviously a pro, you've got a lot of experience doing this. For those folks that are sitting and listening to this episode thinking, I'm not a podcaster, kind of I don't identify as a podcaster. I really don't know if private podcasting is for me. It seems like a lot of work because I know, public podcasts can be a lot of work.
Right.
What advice would you give someone who is just starting out, regardless of, maybe their business model or their niche or where they're at. But if they're really thinking about using private podcasts, is there any specific insights or tips that you would give someone that is new to all of this?
Yes. I think the first thing I would do is just get some pen and paper and start jotting down some ideas of what your private podcast might not only what are the episodes going to be, but what's your goal with it? And I think for me, I'm still a pen and paper person. Like I love tech, I geek out on software, but I'm still a pen and paper person when it comes to brainstorming and mapping out my ideas. I need to see them on paper, and one of the things that has really helped me is just taking 10 minutes, literally set a timer. Give yourself 10 minutes and brain dump episode ideas. And you'll probably walk away with feeling so much lighter and thinking, I think I can do this. Because it's hard to force creativity when you click record. And if you're uncomfortable clicking record and you don't identify as a podcaster and this is new to you, map out, grab maybe 5 of those episodes, map out what they might look like, kind of like chapters in a book. You don't have to script them out, although I will tell you, I have scripted some of my private podcast episodes because I needed to be succinct. I needed to get the idea across. I needed to teach what I needed to teach. And I didn't want these to be long because that was part of the promise of my private podcast. I promised that you could listen to these in one quick session, 15 minutes or less. And so that I would say that would be some of my advice. And then lastly, this is so funny. I tell this to my business friends all the time, lower your bar. Like nothing has to be perfect.
Love that.
Give it your best, but also lower your bar. The first is the worst. It's never going to be perfect, and that's okay. People relate to you want to be relatable. Like you don't want to be perfect. And so just lower your bar a little bit and press record, give it a try.
I love that. It's so true. And I think for those of you that are perfectionists or maybe identify as a perfectionist out
Mhm.
there, this is all about getting the reps in. I mean, at the end of the day, that you've got to get the first rep in. You've got to get the
Yes.
second. As you get more reps in, it gets easier, and it feels aligned and it feels more natural. I guess is maybe the best way to say it. I think we've definitely had folks that like to just talk it out and they like to talk out their thoughts and they just kind of think out loud. We've got folks that do outlines and bullet points, and we have absolutely have folks that script things out, and some that do all three, depending
Right.
on how tired they are, like what the content is, if it's super techy or super complicated. Or, for some folks, they just want to show up and talk to a microphone as if they're just talking to their friend in a coffee shop and they're just kind of
Mhm.
having a casual conversation, and people will resonate with whatever you put out there because the content that you have to share and the knowledge that you have to share is valuable and people will
Yeah.
really appreciate it. And with audio, I know from experience, I would much rather edit audio than edit video any day of the week. And it just makes it so much easier to swap it out once you do the next rep. It's just swapping out audio is so easy. So I love that you've had that experience as well, where it's just the fear or the insecurity or just kind of the friction involved in creating content. I think audio takes a lot of that away.
I would agree.
All right, Julie, as we wrap up here, the folks are waiting. The listeners need to know, what is Julie's podcast name, her private podcast name, if she had a podcast of her life's ramblings? What would you call it?
Such a fun question. And forgive me if someone else has said this answer. Hopefully it's unique, but I would call it plot twist because I swear every single time my parents or friends ask me about my business or ask me about something going on in my life, I tell them what's going on now and I'll say, ask me again in a week because everything seems to change so quickly. And just a quick example is we did a cabin renovation. It was a 100-year-old cabin. We were like, we're going to keep this for Airbnb. And then things changed. The project took longer and took more money, and the market shifted. And my parents are like, can we come visit? Would love to stay in the new cabin. I'm like, plot twist, we're listing it for sale next week. So, between that, between my business, between homeschooling, I feel like things change all the time. And I've just become a lot more flexible, and I'm okay with that. So, the name of my private podcast about my life's ramblings would be Plot Twist.
I love
It
it.
feels
That's
so
good.
spot on for so
Yeah.
many reasons. We can definitely resonate with plot twist. You're like, what is it going to be today? I can,
Uh-huh.
and then you
Plot
have that moment
twist.
of, okay, and then problem solving mode. I love it. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. I'm so excited that people listen to this episode. So many gems throughout. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you and also appreciate you for being one of our OGs.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks so much. It was such a treat to chat with you, lady. And it's fun this is a different type of conversation. No one else asks me about private podcasts. So when you guys asked me to come on and say, how did you use this for your subscription box business? I was so excited because I love creative, out of the box thinking. I had to throw that pun in there.
Ah, that would have been a good podcast name too. Out of the box. I'm just kidding. Maybe you'll have
Yeah.
two.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one too.
Right?
Love it.
Cool. And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.